Sometimes after Sunday services, I have people come up to me afterwards and thank me and give me appreciation for sharing personal stories about myself. And I certainly do appreciate that, but the fact is I really don't know any other way to be a minister. I think that's actually part of my job. I've been doing this work in growth and spirituality for 30 years, and I think it's important for me to share, the good times in my life and the things I've learned, and maybe even to share some of the not so great times as well. So I'm sharing that today because today our topic is cleaning up, and I mean emotionally cleaning up. And when I first started thinking about this talk, I was reminded of maybe my first cleanup opportunities in my life. And maybe my first challenge, really, that led me to do some cleanup work, and that was the divorce of my parents when I was 13 years old. Not a great time to go through, an age to be going through divorce. During that time, my mom was really struggling, and I ended up moving in with my dad while I was in high school, which turned out to be a really good thing. Got to know him much better. And my mom had time to heal. We got through that, Mom, Dad, my older sister, and I, and yet I still think that I was a little bit wounded in that process and didn't really come to terms with that until I was in my mid-20s. Fast forward like 12 years, and in my mid-20s, and I realized that I needed to go back at that time in my life and really look at it closer. I needed to know what happened. I needed to know why it happened. And most importantly, how did it affect me? What was going on in my life today that was affected by that experience? So I'm continuing my series on the human condition this week, and I mentioned a couple weeks ago we need to grow up. We need to clean up emotionally. We need to wake up spiritually, and we need to show up in the world. And folks, today is cleanup day. So just letting you know, I'll also share with you, as a minister, you have to be really careful on topics you pick, because whatever topic I pick, I can guarantee that I'm going to have stuff show up in my life that I'm going to have to do my work. So I've had an interesting week, and I'm here. So I want to start with family of origin issues, which is really the work that I did when I was looking back at what happened with the divorce of my parents. This is often the first area that we have to look at. I would say from the time of birth until the age of 18, maybe longer if you continue to live at home. And this is looking at all the people that were in your life that were helping to bring you up. That your parents, your mom and dad, maybe it was your grandparents, aunt and uncles, certainly your siblings, anyone that was in your immediate house or had an effect on your life. So we call that family of origin issues. I will even share that in some of my work, I became aware that I had this low-grade anger issue that still existed within me. And I don't know that it was directed particularly to either one of my parents, but I was recognizing that it existed with me, and I needed to explore more about it. The bottom line is we need to make peace with our parents or any of those people that are in our life. It really is a liberating thing to be willing to look at that and to make peace with whatever is going on. And it takes a maturity to do that, to realize whatever emotion that I am experiencing is about me and not necessarily about the other person. Not only do we have to make peace with the people that were there, we may even have to make peace with people that were not there, especially if you had a father or mother that was not present. You would need to do work around that. So my guidebook in this series has been, one of the guidebooks has been The Human Condition by Thomas Keating. And he says that no matter what your childhood was like, whether it be challenging, maybe even abusive, or it might have been completely joyful. On some level, it doesn't matter which experience you had, you still have to go through the process of living the human condition. And this is what he says about that. He says, as soon as we notice we are annoyed or angry about something, we tend to protect ourselves by projecting the cause of our upsetting emotion onto a situation or another person. They did this to me. They are always a problem. But in fact, the real problem is not them, but us. All biases and prejudices are the attitudes of a child from ages 4 to 8. If they are present in us, we are still functioning at the level of a pre-adolescent. Now that might be kind of hard to hear. I look like an adult, I feel like an adult, but gosh, if I'm in that reactive space, then I'm acting like maybe a 4-year-old. We really need to be able to look at that and appreciate what's going on. When my parents divorced, I actually thought I was the only one. And in that day and age, I may have been close to the only one, but the truth is there was other dysfunction going on in other families around me. Even though I had friends that parents stayed together, I had this fantasy about what their life was like, and it was only years later that I discovered that all families are dysfunctional. And we have to actually learn how to be healthy. It's part of our work as a human being to learn how to be healthy. One of the best ways, I think, to start this work is to find a place of comfort and community. This was certainly key when I got started. I don't believe that people can actually heal by themselves. I think it requires a community to do that, working in conjunction with other people and creating a safe space. I think that part of the comfort seeking is something that we need to really grasp and claim out there before we can grasp and claim it within here. Keating says we're all searching for happiness, but I think finding comfort along the way was certainly a significant milestone for me. You know, it helped me move beyond that fear that I didn't even know that I had. It helped me acknowledge it to do the work that I needed to do. So I found comfort in attending church, and I listened here in the Midwest to Reverend Mary Emwake only a few times before realizing that I had some healing work to do and forgiveness work to do. And I found comfort in lessons from Al-Anon, where I learned that I wasn't alone in my life experience. One of the things that really helped me was these little daily devotionals. I started reading this through Al-Anon before I actually discovered the daily word, and it's familiar. But it was powerful to me to hear other experiences, just a little paragraph every day of another experience of another person in another dysfunctional family, and what they did to really acknowledge what was going on and how they could heal themselves. Like this. And this book is probably 30 years old. It's called Courage to Change. I came to Al-Anon confused about what was and was not my responsibility. Today, after lots of step work, I believe I am responsible for the following: to be loyal to my values, to please myself first, to keep an open mind, to detach with love, to rid myself of anger and resentment, to express my ideas and feelings instead of stuffing them, to attend Al-Anon meetings and keep in touch with friends in the fellowship, to be realistic in my expectations, to make healthy choices, and to be grateful for my blessings. So again, it was liberating for me to hear the experience of other people that experienced dysfunction in some way. I also found that the groups were incredibly supportive, and it was liberating to acknowledge that people could talk about their experiences, and I did not have to fix them. That's a key component of our growth work. We can listen to people and support them, but we don't have to fix. We just listen, and that is the work that we can do. It's also easier in those group circles to see that we can identify issues in other people. It's easier to see them in other people, and then eventually we discover, oh, I can see that because that's within me too. It's kind of how it works. So it took me a full year to work those 12 steps of Al-Anon for the very first time, and I believe that this was a crucial, important part of me dealing with the low-level anger issue that I said that I had. I will also agree that with Thomas Keating, when he says that I was probably looking in some way for a path of happiness when I was stepping into Al-Anon, at least peace, I know that for sure. And I'm grateful for establishing a connection to a higher power at that time. I certainly believe that real healing requires a spiritual solution. I love this picture of a dandelion that resonates with me in some of the work that we do. Again, back to Thomas Keating and the human condition, he says, when Jesus said repent to his first disciples, he was calling them to change the direction in which they were looking for happiness. Repent is an invitation to grow up and become a fully mature human being who integrates the biological needs with the rational level of consciousness. The rational level of consciousness is the door that swings into higher states, the intuitive and unitive levels of consciousness. So here's the key, that they open us to the experience of God's presence, which restores the sense of happiness. We can then take possession of everything that was good in our early life while leaving the distortions behind. I think we do have to acknowledge at some point that it was our child mind that created some of those situations, not our adult mind. Charles Fillmore also said something similar to this in The Revealing Word. He said, repentance is the reversal of our mind and heart, our error thinking. When we repent, we have an ability to shift our thinking to a higher spiritual place. I know this from experience, that when we can get to that spiritual realization and new perspective, what has harmed us seems to just fall away, sort of like the dandelion that's evolved, and we can blow it, and the little pieces of it blow and reseed in the soil around it. When I started doing emotional healing work, I quickly picked up on the fact that there was a mind-body connection to what was going on. The Fillmores write extensively around this, mostly because they didn't have modern medicine and they had physical issues. Myrtle was told that she would have inherited sickness, and Charles had an ice skating accident when he was quite young and had a leg issue that was imbalanced for the majority of his life, and yet they still healed. It was through their own physical healing that they discovered the power of their own minds. In Christian healing, Charles Fillmore said this, that the body is moved by thought is universally accepted, but that thought is also the builder of the body is not so widely admitted. Can you really take that in and hear what that's saying? It wasn't long after I began reading the pioneer literature of the Fillmores that I also started hearing of these amazing people called medical intuitives, women like Carolyn Mace and Mona Lisa Schultz and Louise Hay. In Anatomy of the Spirit, Carolyn Mace says this. She says, spiritual maturation includes not only developing the ability to interpret the deeper messages of the sacred texts, but learning to read the spiritual language of the body. Mace says that the human condition is a journey of continued healing, followed by a gain of authentic power. Okay? We heal, and then we gain power. Her research focuses mostly on the chakra system, the 7 major chakras, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. But she equates this to mental and emotional issues that are a potential area of disease or disease within the body. So for instance, we don't have time to go through all of these, but I did want to share one of them, at least so you have an idea if you're not familiar with this. The 3rd chakra is the yellow light that's in the middle of our body. That's the solar plexus, and it's about our personal power. So this has to deal with issues of trust and fear and intimidation, self-esteem, caring for oneself and others, responsibility for making decisions, and sensitivity to criticism. But this is connected then to emotional issues that may show up later. If we have an issue in our body that's blocked, it may show up as disease, such as the arthritis or gastric ulcers or colon intestinal problems, pancreatitis and diabetes, and the list goes on. So what's so important or powerful for me in this work is that if any of us know that we have a medical diagnosis or a physical issue, we can possibly trace that issue to an issue that is an emotional issue that resides within our body that we have not completely given enough attention to. For instance, in healing, a 3rd chakra is about learning to honor oneself. If we can honor ourselves more completely, then perhaps this block will go away. And this 3rd chakra is also about self-esteem, which is to have a positive evaluation of yourself. I would also like to acknowledge, though, that these books, if you read them, are resources. I'm trusting the medical tool intuitives in some way, but I still want you to listen to yourself. It's just a resource for you to look at, and then you need to listen into yourself. Is this an area that I really need to do work in? And it may or it may not, but at least look at it and be willing to question. And please don't beat yourself up. I've seen some people misuse Louise Hay's book and saying, oh my goodness, this is it. And then they start beating themselves up. Don't do that. All of Mace's work teaches us how to be in the world, but not of the world, something that we hear a lot of in the Bible. She says true, authentic power is a self that can enjoy the magnificence of the physical world without allowing the world's many illusions to deplete its soul. Can I ask, does your soul feel depleted? And if it does, what's the work that you need to do so that it's not? So you might be asking, how do I actually access this self-esteem issue within myself and heal it? Well, there are a lot of emotional tools out there, and the bottom line is it takes some work. My favorites are the 12-step program that I talked about. I also do breathwork practice, which I share here occasionally, prayer and meditation. The practice of meditation actually brings these issues up out of your psyche, out of your subconscious mind, into your conscious mind, so that you can do the work that is needed. You'll become aware. and then also therapy. And all of these practices bring up what I call the shadow. A great book on 12-step recovery that I don't know many people have read in Unity. It's called Awakening in Time. It's by Jacqueline Small, and she talks about the shadow and how she perceives it. She said the shadow is a product of all those old repressed hurts left over from our early years, which are now lodged in our subconscious minds and create our current self-destructive patterns and feelings of insecurity. And our refusers to allow these denied feelings expression, either because we're ashamed of them or we don't even recognize their existence. We have not allowed our shadow to be faced, understood, accepted, and released. Unless we stop denying the split off and unwanted self, our healing will be on hold, and our lives will be fraught with imbalanced emotions of codependence. Now, the shadow is a term that was created by psychologist Carl Jung, and this is a part of ourselves that we try to hide or deny, not only to our friends and families, but really we try to deny this even within ourselves. I appreciate the work of Debbie Ford, if any of you were familiar with her. She says that the shadow, this is a message we get from this hidden place, is simple. There is something wrong with me. She says, I'm not okay. I'm not lovable. I'm not deserving. I'm not worthy. That's the self-talk that is going on. Now, Debbie Ford wrote this book called, which I love the title, The Dark Side of the Light Chasers. It was in the late 1990s, and I would consider anybody in Unity that's doing this work likes to be a light chaser. We want to bring that light into our life. And she was focusing on the dark, and she said we have to look at the shadow so that we can claim the light. Ford found out that she could actually name disowned aspects of herself so that she could work with them and learn about herself. And this is a very unique practice, and that's why I decided to share it today. She created this sort of guided meditation for herself where she recognized that there was a behavior within her life that was not working, and she would list the behavior, and then she would create a character to represent what that behavior was about. So here's her list. She came up with, and she put them on a bus. Part of her meditation was to put them on a bus. So here are my characters. I'm going to put them on a bus, and one by one, I'm going to take them off the bus and go on like a meditative walk with them in my mind in self-reflection and figure out what they have to say to me. So one of them was Big Bertha, Big Mouth, Angry Alice, Gorging Greta, and Trashy Trixie. Those were the names that she came up with. And she's just putting it all out there, isn't she? And so here's her definition or her explanation of what Bertha was like. She said, Bertha stood about 5 feet tall, weighed 200 pounds. She was in her 60s and was my worst nightmare in terms of appearance. She had thinning gray hair, which was poorly cut and sticking up in front of her face. She was reeking of hairspray and cigarettes. She was wearing a beige muumuu with large orange polka dots. Wrapped around her shoulders was a beige polyester sweater, held together with an old rusty pin. Her legs were fat and her stockings were torn and her feet were badly worn plastic shoes. So again, she went to great lengths to define what these characters were about. And this is actually what Debbie Ford really looked like. She did pass away just a few years ago. You can see it was nothing like her. But she said that the thing that she learned about these characters was so powerful for her. For instance, Big Bertha, Big Mouth, when she actually was reflective and spent some time in taking Big Bertha off her bus and took a walk with her, she discovered that despite all of her spiritual work that she'd been doing in her life, she thought she was very spiritually evolved. She found out that she was still judging people by appearance, and that was a huge lesson for her to shift her behavior and her thinking. She learned from Angry Alice that there was a part of her that was sometimes screaming and acting out. And she said that was the person that would show up when there was some kind of danger that was present, a warning to her. She learned from Gorging Greta, times when she was gorging food and she was running around too much. She found out that she needed to be more grounded. If she was more grounded, then that behavior didn't show up. And she learned from Trashy Trixie when she decided that she was wearing shorts that were too short, short skirts that were too short, and she had a bit of a foul mouth. She said when she really tapped into what Trixie was all about, she found out that she needed to treat herself with more dignity. So the messages of these characters can be profound if you're willing to do just a little bit of work to explore that. And I might ask you right now, if you had to pick one behavior in your life that is not working for you, just think about it for a minute. Maybe put your hand on your heart. What's one behavior in your life that's not working for you? And would you be willing to take that behavior and develop a character around that behavior and figure out what they're doing, put it on the bus, and then maybe someday, later today or later this week, spend maybe 10 minutes and take that person, name them, describe them vividly, take that person off the bus, and find out what information, valuable information, that they have to share with you. Okay. So identifying these characters and the emotions within ourselves that have long been part of the human condition is so important that we do this work. I love this poem by the 13th century Iranian poet Rumi. It's called The Guest House. This human being is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness come as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. 13th century poem, letting you know that this work, this emotional work, has been going on as long as there's been human beings. Now, I have to admit, in writing this talk today, I probably had 4 weeks worth of material for this talk, you all. This cleaning up issue is just a big one. And so I want to kind of point you in the right direction with the time that I have left. I do think that there are two other key issues that people need to be aware of in their life, and that is codependency. And I define that as any person really looking outside themselves for something to fill them up. You know, when we can fill it, that's why a spiritual solution is so important. When we can fill ourselves up with the Spirit, then we're not looking outside anymore. It's within us. And also creating healthy boundaries is very important. What I did is I created a book list, and I posted it on the bulletin board out front. And you can take if you have an iPhone, you can take a picture of it as you leave with it today, or get a pen and pencil and write those book names down. I'm challenging you, if you have any issues that you need to look at around the mind-body stuff I'm talking about, codependency, healthy boundaries, there are books there that are available for you, and they're powerful books. They're life-changing books. So if you're aware that you need to do some work, get the names of those books and read them. And not only that, but take time to maybe write down a few notes of what you've learned, and go to our Facebook page and post something that you learned in just a few sentences about yourself and your own journey. By reaching out and sharing that way, you're connecting, you're healing yourself, but you're also helping others heal as well. Now, I really believe, I want to shift a little bit to developmental lines. I mentioned in Growing Up a couple weeks ago that there are all these developmental lines that we work with as we're growing and evolving. And one of the main ones I think that helps us do cleanup work is actually do the work of emotional intelligence. This is a term that's been popular in the last 10 years. We're continuing to learn more about it. This is the work of Daniel Goleman. And there are two, I won't go into this very deeply, I just want to give you some parameters, some simple understanding. There are two key areas that we need to look at. I believe that if you're working on your emotional intelligence, then the work of cleaning up, emotional cleaning up, will happen naturally. So I'm encouraging you and pointing you to do work on emotional intelligence. It involves a couple areas. And EQ stands for emotional intelligence, like IQ for mental intelligence. So EQ, 2 to 3 different areas. Self-awareness, this is identifying our feelings and our thoughts about them. Self-regulation, which is about that self-control. We want to keep those disruptive emotions in check. And also motivation. Do we have the motivation to move forward in our life the way that we want to be? Now, I would like to think that just because I'm sharing this with you, you would take steps to look closer at what those 3 different areas mean. But I know that some of you might need just a little bit more motivation to really look at this. And so I was looking at some of the research, and I discovered that there is an actual financial prosperity element that's connected to doing this work. So there's money motivation that might make you do it, if just my talking about it won't. This is from Bradbury and Greaves. People with high IQs make more money and average $29,000 more per year than people with low EQs. I think that's significant. They said the link between EQ and earnings is so direct that every point increase in EQ adds $1,300 to an annual salary. These findings hold true in all industries, at all levels, and in every region of the world. So not only do we have to do our personal work, we have to do some social work as well. 2 main categories within the social work or social competence area are social skills. I would select working on conflict management first so that you can learn how to deal with conflict in your life and you aren't avoiding it. And also empathy is a major one. And I copied a section out of a book by Daniel Goleman on working. It's the second book that he wrote where he was really defining more about what it means to be emotionally intelligent. There's a little handout that he had. I copied it today, and it's available before you as you leave today. And it's just a list of the subjects in each category of what are the things that I can be looking at within myself if I want to do this work. But ultimately, I can talk about this, and it's a little bit of being in the head, but the question is, how do we move out of our head, and how do we move into our heart? So I want to share just a little bit about empathy. I want you to notice that some of the lessons around this stuff doesn't have to be massive and long and involved. I found a short little video from Brene Brown on YouTube, and she's talking about the difference between empathy and sympathy. This runs about a little over 2 minutes, and I definitely think there's a lesson in this for all of us.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different from sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person, or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, I'm down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. I have it, yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. At least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So I hope that you can feel that shift from the head information to the heart and really seeing it come to alive. And I'm really hoping that just by watching that video, you'll be able to take that lesson into some kind of relationship that maybe you have very soon this week. You know, one of the other things that I've learned as a minister and in working with people, I think this has become my favorite saying in working with people, is to be gentle with yourself. You know, as we close today, I want to affirm that the work that we do can be easy and it can be pain-free, but the truth is, often it isn't. You know, we are healing, and that often means that we can access painful parts of our history. My request is that you find out about one of those parts of yourself. And when you do find one of those parts of yourself, you just love it. You love it. I think half of the work is being aware of what the issue is. Another fourth of the issue is just loving yourself through the process. And then the last little piece, the other fourth, is actually doing the work. So it doesn't have to be that difficult. We need love and we need self-compassion as we do this. So I found a special meditation, a guided meditation for us today. And so in just a moment, we'll have some special music, and then we'll go straight into guided meditation. This meditation is from Sarah Raymond, and she created a journey of self-acceptance. And as always, I want to thank each and every one of you for doing your cleanup work. And right out of the video of meditation, it's about 8 minutes long, so open yourself up, get comfortable, get grounded, and then right after the meditation, we'll go back into another piece of special music. Again, thank you so much for being willing to do your work. God bless.